Hello YouTube, how's it going? This is the crossover and I'm back with another video. Today I'm continuing my series where I break down my top 10 players at each position. So today's video is going to be about my top 10 players at the power forward position. So without any further ado, let's get straight into the video. Before I get into my list, I have three honorable mentions that I would like to talk about. First up, I have Jeremy Grant of the Detroit Pistons, who averaged 22 points and 4 rebounds per game last year for that ball club. Obviously, he wanted a much larger role than what he had in Denver the previous season. So he decided to go to Detroit, where he would have a much larger, much more expanded role. And he had, even though he averaged 22 points, his efficiency wasn't really there. Again, you got to take into context that Detroit didn't really have anybody around him. But still, when you watch Jeremy Grant, I don't think he got like that much better. So even though his stats might warrant him being, in the top 10, and he's not, he's a pretty solid, he's a pretty good defender. But even though again the stats might warrant him being in the top 10, you got to take into account efficiency and the fact that his production is mainly due to usage and not in fact him actually getting that much better, especially when you watch the tape. So did Jeremy Grant get better with his self creation ability? I think so, maybe a little bit, but not like a crazy amount. I think most of his production is just due to nobody being on that Detroit roster. So he didn't actually get better. So I personally decided to leave Jeremy Grant outside the top 10. And if you want to argue he's the 10th or 9th best power forward in the league, you go ahead and argue. But again, I think his production last year was mainly just due to the increased usage that he got on that Detroit team. Moving forward to my second honorable mention, I have Aaron Gordon, the power forward for the Denver Nuggets, who averaged 12 points per game, 5 rebounds, and 3 assists for that ball club last year. He was traded to Denver last year at the trade deadline, had a much different role with the Orlando Magic, where he had been his entire tenure in the NBA. He was asked to be much more of a shot creator, which he was not good in that role. He took a lot more threes with Orlando, and he shot them at a pretty decent clip, both on and off the ball. But when he was traded to Denver, with all the pieces that they already have in Jokic and Murray and Michael Porter Jr., he wasn't asked to do any self-creation at all. He was asked to, be a great cutter for that team, maybe do a little facilitating off, roles, and just be an overall defender. He wasn't asked to, shut any guys down, but he was just asked to, cover multiple positions. And, he filled that role great. And up until Jamal Murray went out. And then, Denver really needed another guy, in the playoffs to really step up and help out Nikola Jokic in terms of, shot creation ability. And, Aaron Gordon just, wasn't able to do that, for this ball club. So, yeah, Aaron Gordon has always been a jack of all trades. He's good at everything. Not even good. I'd say he's pretty good at everything. Not really good or great at any one thing. So Aaron Gordon is a quality power forward, but he's right outside the top 10 for me. And then finally, I have PJ Washington, the power forward for the Charlotte Hornets, who averaged pretty much 13 points 13 points per game last year, 6 rebounds and 2 assists. PJ Washington is one of my favorite young power forwards in the league. Given how versatile he is, he's a very solid defender. He does a pretty good job of covering the perimeter, as well as he doesn't do the best job amongst power forwards in terms of protecting the paint, given that he is a little bit slender, but I think he does an adequate job. I think he's a very solid defender, and I think as he continues to grow in the NBA, he's only going to get better and better on that end of the floor. I think that on the offensive end, he offers much needed floor spacing for the Charlotte Hornets team. Is very valuable. I think he's a very good floor spacer at that 4 spot. Has a little bit of playmaking capabilities. And I think his offensive repertoire is going to continue to develop, as he gets, more age and more reps in the NBA. So PJ Washington, a pretty solid overall power forward, in terms of, being able to space the floor, having playmaking chops. I think he's going to continue. I don't think he's going to be any kind of 20-point per game scorer, but I think he's going to continue to develop, maybe a couple, like 1 or 2 moves here and there, which should only continue to increase his offensive versatility. And on defense, he does a great job of both protecting the paint, pretty good job of protecting the paint, as well as covering perimeter players. So PJ Washington is a very sound power forward, very solid power forward. But I in terms of putting him in the top 10, I don't think he has the stats to warrant that kind of a spot. But I think right outside the top 10, given how valuable of a player he is where he belongs. To start off my list at number 10, I have John Collins, the power forward for the Atlanta Hawks, who averaged 17 points, 7 rebounds, and 1 assist per game for that ball club last season. And John Collins is a very, very solid big on the offensive side of the floor. His ability as a rim roller with Trae Young, it's like bread and butter. It goes hand in hand. His ability to space the floor at that power forward spot. Allows Atlanta to put three shooters around Trae Young and Clint Capella, and his floor spacing, especially if at the corners where he is, that he shoots the best, at the two corner spots. That really allows Atlanta to go, put three shooters around Trae Young, but a high pick and roll with Clint Capella, and that's part of Atlanta's offense as well. And given his versatility in terms of being a great rim roller and again being a great shooter, it allows Atlanta to do a lot of different things on the offensive side of the floor. But again, he's a great free throw shooter. Shot right around 83% on right around 3 attempts per game. So that's a pretty solid efficiency from the free throw line for a power forward. Is very efficient around the paint. Just because of how great of a rim roller he is, and his 3-point efficiency. He shot right around three threes per game and shot them at pretty much a 40% clips. At that power forward position, you can't ask for any more. The reason why John Collins is at 10 is just because of his defensive limits. He struggles in terms of not only protecting the paint but as well as protecting the perimeter. So even though John Collins is a very solid offensive power forward, and his fit next to Trae Young and the rest of that Atlanta roster is great. And I expect big things for them going forward. His defensive woes don't allow me to put him any further. But again, he's a great offensive big, and what hinders him is his defensive impact. Coming in at number 9, I have Pascal Siakam, the power forward for the Toronto Raptors, who averaged 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists per game for that ball club this previous season. And the reason why Pascal Siakam is so low is just because of he had a pretty significant down year, and I think a couple guys jumped him this previous season. I think he's a very solid defender, always has been, but again, he's a very solid defender in terms of being able to cover the perimeter. I think that's his best skill set at that power forward spot. He does a very good job of that. I think he does struggle a little bit in the paint in terms of covering big men, just because of, again, similar to PJ Washington, how small his frame is, how skinny he is. But on the defensive end of the floor, his ability to cover the perimeter is very valuable at that power forward spot. So he's a very good defender overall. But again, on the offensive end, he took a pretty concerning step backwards, and I think due to that step back, I think a lot of guys just jumped in this previous season. His 3-point efficiency fell off a cliff, and just his overall self creation ability was pretty concerning this previous season. And given how much Toronto is paying Pascal Siakam, I do have pretty big concerns going forward. And even though he is a pretty solid defender, and again, they averaged 21 points per game, and the efficiency was down, but it wasn't so down. It's just a couple other guys just had better seasons than him this previous season. So in my opinion, I couldn't rank Pascal Siakam any higher than 8, even though he is a very good defender, and he is a 21-point per game scorer with some playmaking abilities, a decent rebounder at that size. But again, his woes on the offensive end of the floor this previous season, and the fact that other guys just had better seasons than him this previous year, doesn't allow me to put him any higher than 9. Coming in at number 8, I have Domantas Sabonis, the power forward for the Indiana Pacers, who averaged 20 points, 12 rebounds, and 6.7 assists per game for that ball club. Offensively, Domantas Sabonis was pretty dominant last year, in terms of being a playmaking hub, out of the mid and low post. He was able to make a lot of impressive reads, and especially out of the roll in pick and roll situations, he made a lot of impressive reads. Just really developed as a playmaker, and I think that's my favorite part of his game. Down low in the post, he's pretty much unstoppable. He's a bucket every time. A decent, not great roll man, just because of how slow he is, but is a very good offensive player overall. Didn't shoot the ball that great from the free throw line, neither from the 3-point from behind the arc, but didn't really take that many 3-point attempts, and wasn't a great free throw shooter, but I thought he did a solid enough job on that, from behind the arc, or excuse me, from the free throw line. Is always been a great rebounder. Is a great defensive rebounder, which is the reason why I have him at 8, is just because of how poor of a defender he is, in terms of both protecting the rim and in terms of guarding the perimeter. But he is a very solid defensive rebounder, so it does make up for some of the loss that he has, in terms of being a poor perimeter and paint defender. But Domantas Sabonis, even though he is so dominant offensively, similar to Nikola Vucevic, given his defensive woes, limits his overall impact and ceiling on a contending team. So, again, similar to Nikola Vucevic, Domantas Sabonis, a dominant offensive player. But again, his defensive woes, limits how high on this list I can put him. So, again, Domantas Sabonis, dominant offensive player, great play, great, hub, offensively on that low and high post. Gets to the free throw line a good amount. It is unstoppable on the post, but his defensive woes limits how high I can put him on this list. Coming in at number 7, I have Tobias Harris, the power forward for the Philadelphia 76ers, who averaged 19 points, 6 rebounds, and 3 assists for that ball club this previous season. Offensively, Tobias Harris is a very solid power forward. He doesn't take a lot of threes or a lot of free throws, really, but he shoots them both at a pretty good clip, right around 39% from behind the arc, and, right around 89% from the free throw line. His bread and butter on the offensive end in terms comes, in his ability to create his own shot right around, the mid-range, like mid-post area. That's where he likes to feed. And, his fit with this Sixers team is just questionable, again, due to, Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid both needing to be, Joel Embiid's best skill set is around the paint, and Ben Simmons can't shoot. So Tobias Harris being a mid-range scorer on this team is kind of redundant. But again, Tobias Harris is a very solid overall offensive player. And then, on the defensive end, I think his defensive impact is overrated vastly. He's playing with 3 of the top 10 defenders in the league. So he's not really asked to do much, but he does fill his role on the defensive end. He's a solid 2-way power forward. It's just his overall offensive value, given the fact that he's really just a mid-range scorer. That's where his value comes in. A low post scorer at that, kind of hinders his value, overall. And I think he's just put in a wrong situation in Philly again. Given that, Joel Embiid needing to dominate in the paint and Ben Simmons not being able to shoot. I think Tobias Harris, if he was in a better situation, with more spacing around him, I think he would look much better. But he already looks pretty solid in Philly. And again, his offensive, impact in terms of just being a mid-range scorer, that's where his real value comes in. Again, it could be that I'm just sour on him due to the playoffs and, the fact that the situation that he's in. But again, he's a solid two-way power forward, and I couldn't find myself ranking him any higher than 7. Coming in at number 6, I have Draymond Green, the power forward for the Golden State Warriors, who averaged 7 points, 7 rebounds, and 9 assists for the ball club last year. And, starting off on the defensive end, not much needs to be stated about Draymond Green on that end of the floor. His ability as a leader, as a switch defender, he can guard 1 through 4. His ability, again, as a switchy and help defender, he's one of the best in the league. He's probably the best in the league at that, if not the best, and one of the best all time, in terms of being, a help defender, as a switch defender with his length, his wingspan and his mobility, his IQ on that side of the floor. I don't think his rim protection is a bit overrated, but he does a great job at that. Again, his IQ allows him to get timely blocks, inside the paint. Again, he could guard 1 through 4. He's a defensive player of the year finalist. Really anchored this Golden State Warriors defense that was one of the best in the league. With not that many defensive pieces around him. So he's an amazing defensive talent. Now, nothing needs to be stated about Draymond on that end of the floor. However, offensively, his playmaking is very valuable, when Steph Curry's on the floor. And if you notice, Steve Kerr only played the 2 of them together. Their 2-man game is something to watch. It's kind of funny how Draymond Green will just pass up open lanes and just look for Steph Curry. But, their chemistry, and, Draymond Green will hit Steph Curry on spots where Curry's not even there yet. And he'll hit him just because he knows that he'll be there wide open. But again, Draymond Green's lack of, really any kind of bag ability to shoot the 3 or as an adequate free throw shooter, hinders his overall impact on the offensive side of the floor. But again, his defensive impact and his leadership and his playmaking, not only with Steph Curry, but, when Steph Curry's on the floor, the gravity that he creates, he does a great job of, attacking the seams and finding the open man. And, even though he can't create his own shot, and I can't put him any higher than 6, but, given how awesome of a defender he is, and his playmaking abilities and just as an overall leader, even with his offensive roles, there's no way Draymond Green is not ranked amongst the upper echelon of power forwards. Coming in at number 5, I have Julius Randle, the power forward for the New York Knicks. who averaged 24 points, 10 rebounds, and 6 assists per game this previous season. Not much needs to be said about Julius Randle's breakout season. I mean, we all heard the stories. We can start off on the offensive end though. His growth as a playmaker. Much smarter player than he was last year. Much more patient. Much more willing to make the right reads. And then from behind the arc, his revelation as a 40% shooter from behind the arc on an increased volume of attempts, and it's not just catch and shoot. It was side steps, step backs. It was extremely impressive. But I do have some slight concerns as to whether or not this was just a blimp in the radar, just because of he was still inefficient, from inside the arc. Overall he was not the most efficient player. But again, he anchored this Knicks offense. So even with your shooting concerns and efficiency concerns, you still got to take what Julius Randle gave the Knicks last season, and just can't walk away not super impressed. And then the defensive end of the floor, I think he was a bit overrated. I saw a lot of people saying that, oh, he's a better defender than this guy and that guy and this guy, all defensive. Like, no, Julius Randle was a solid defender, very solid defender. But, everybody on that Knicks team, I don't think was, any all NBA caliber defenders. I think it was mainly due to, Thibodeau's schemes and, his rotations that he had in place for the Knicks last season. And I think they were just a very sound collective unit. And I don't think anybody looked really bad defensively, except for maybe like Obi Toppin. But overall, my Knicks as a unit, they looked very good, defensively, and I think Julius Randle again looked very, very solid defensively. And even in the playoffs, he looked very solid. Even when he was put on an island by Trae Young, Trae Young scored on him a couple times, but even when he did get scored on, it was just like that's good defense, but it's just better offense. So again, Julius Randle, very valuable defender, very solid defender. And then offensively, his ability to not only put the ball in the hole from behind the arc. And even, I think he was a decently improved mid-range shooter. But again, his efficiency from inside the paint and, from mid-range does concern me a little bit, even though he did get a little better from the mid-range. His overall efficiency is definitely a question for me. But, the jump that he took this previous season, there's no way you can't have Julius Randle any lower than 5, in my opinion. Coming in at number 4, I have Zion Williamson, the power forward for the New Orleans Pelicans, who averaged 27 points, 7 rebounds, and nearly 4 assists for this ball club this previous season. Zion Williamson is a generational talent. There's no other way to put it. He is like a combination of, I like to compare him to, Charles Barkley with a little bit of Blake Griffin, with a little bit of Shaq in there, just given how dominant he is. Offensively, scoring inside the paint. In my opinion, he might be the best offensive rebounder of the game. He really likes to, miss his own shot, get his own rebound, and just how big he is, just how much of a force he is down low. He's the best scorer inside the paint, except put aside Giannis Antetokounmpo. He's one of the best scorers inside the paint of all time. He's the most efficient scorer in the paint outside of Shaquille O'Neal, I believe, this previous season. He broke a record. He's just a generational talent on that side of the floor, and he's continued to grow as a playmaker. Stan Van, as the season went along, empowered Point Zion, and he did a great job, in pick and rolls in terms of finding, his teammates, for given how young he is and how inexperienced he is at that role. So Point Zion was a success. His ability to just score inside the paint, is unprecedented, unlike anybody we've ever seen, except for, Shaquille O'Neal and Giannis Antetokounmpo. That's how dominant he is in the paint. He does have his defensive concerns, but I think a lot of that is just due to effort. The Stan Van Gundy seems to have lost the locker room. All those guys seem to be, out of it. So again, and there's not that many defensive pieces around Zion, right? When you have a superstar talent like Zion, you want to build around their weaknesses. You don't want to empower them. And the Pelicans pretty much have no positive impact defenders now, especially now that Lonzo Ball is gone. So I expect Zion to continue to look poor on the defensive end, but I think most of that is just effort. And again, the locker room was lost, and there's no defensive pieces around Zion, especially now with Lonzo gone. So I give him a bit of slack for that. But just how dominant and how good of an offensive player he is. He's a superstar. He's on his way to being an all-time great if he continues this up. So there's no way Zion can be any lower than number 4, on my list. Coming in at number 3, I have Anthony Davis, the power forward for the Los Angeles Lakers, who averaged 21 points, 7 rebounds, and 3 assists for the ball club this previous year. So we can start off on the offensive side of the floor. There's no beating around the bush. Anthony Davis definitely had a bad season offensively this previous year in terms of just production and efficiency. But he was dealing with a lot of issues. In terms of injuries. He almost snapped his Achilles. And even before the injuries, you can attribute that to the bubble. And as well as just even the Heat, the Lakers and Heat, both of those guys, both of their players didn't really have the best start to the season. So I think had Anthony Davis stayed healthy, I think he would have continued to look more like old Anthony Davis. I think it was just really fatigue, and I'm sure his body was aching at that point. And there's no questions about Anthony Davis on the defensive end of the floor. In my opinion, he's the best defender in the league. His ability to guard the perimeter. One possession he could lock down Chris Paul and Devin Booker, and then another possession he could have a game-saving block on DeAndre Ayton, similar to what Giannis had. And he's just invaluable on the defensive end. Not much needs to be stated. And even in this down year, offensively, he was still an awesome defender. And on the offensive side of the floor, I think he'll be fine. As long as his body is healthy and the fatigue is gone. Anthony Davis is going to produce at an amazing level. He's the greatest rim roller of all time. His ability to create his own shot in the mid range with that smooth touch, and he's a decent 3-point shooter. But when it's on, there's no stopping Anthony Davis. He's a generational talent, an all time player. There's Anthony Davis at 3 should be no question, even with the down year that he had. But as long as his body stays healthy and the fatigue isn't there, Anthony Davis is going to be a top 8, 7, 6 player in the league, automatically. So, Anthony Davis doesn't belong anywhere else in this list except for 3, and could potentially even move up, if he stays healthy and the fatigue is gone. Coming in at number 2, I have Giannis Antetokounmpo, the power forward for the Milwaukee Bucks, who averaged 28 points, 11 rebounds, and 6 assists for that ball club this previous season. Not much needs to be stated. Giannis Antetokounmpo, the reigning Finals MVP. It's Giannis Antetokounmpo. If you need me to talk about him, he's a defensive player of the year. His ability to switch and guard the paint is unprecedented. He's not the best in terms of switching out on the perimeter. I think he can get taken advantage of sometimes, but he does an a pretty serviceable job for his size. But he's a defensive player of the year. Not much needs to be stated about Giannis and that on the floor. And then offensively, his ability to slash the paint, is unprecedented. He's gotten so much better as a playmaker. He's an awesome rebounder. A finisher inside the rim is great. And not much needs to be stated about Giannis. He's Giannis Antetokounmpo. And his ability. I think the next step for Giannis though is to develop much more of a post game. Maybe get 1 or 2 moves down there, and speed up his free throw routine. A lot of times when you have a bad free throw shooter, you don't want to have them at the line, for so long, right? It just doesn't make sense to you. When you have a bad free throw shooter, you don't want their routine to take 10, 15 seconds, right? Besides the fact that it's not legal. You want them to get the ball and get it up as quickly as possible, so that, they don't have time to sit there and think, right? So I think, next step for Giannis, maybe 1 or 2 post moves, and get the ball out quicker, get a much quicker free throw routine. But even without that, Giannis is a Finals MVP, a champion, a 2-time MVP, all NBA. He's the first ballot Hall of Famer at the age of 26, the most accomplished player in the NBA history at the age of 26, without any real post moves, and or a free throw routine, which I think are the only 2 things left that he needs in his game. But it's Giannis. No need to explain. And finally, at number 1, I have Kevin Durant, the power forward for the Brooklyn Nets, who averaged 27 points, 7 rebounds, and nearly 6 assists per game. Kevin Durant, coming off that Achilles injury, we all thought that he would take a step back. He took a step forward. He got much better in terms of a playmaker. When Kyrie and Harden both missed time, he really took over the offense. And, I thought he did a great job as a playmaker, finding guys, in terms of, hitting people, in pick and roll situations, hitting the big man, as well as finding shooters open. Was a very solid defender, very, very good all around. His ability to protect the paint with his length, and as well as switch out into the perimeter with his feet, quickness, is very valuable. I think Kevin Durant has become a very solid defender. But offensively, it's Kevin Durant. What really stands out to me is just his efficiency at the volume and difficulty of shots that he was taking. I mean, he took 5 threes per game and hit them at a 45% clip. That's insane. Like, just saying that out loud is insane. 88% for the free throw line on 7 attempts per game. 57% from 2-point range at 12 attempts per game. Like, that's crazy. And when you take into account that those attempts are not just layups. Those are hard contested mid range shots. I mean, it's insane. The level of efficiency that Kevin Durant had this previous season at the production that he had with how difficult the shots were. He had a 66 true shooting percentage. The league average is 58. Given the difficult, that's insane. The difficulty of shots that Kevin Durant was taking and how efficient he was. Again, we all heard the memes that if his foot was an inch shorter, he would have beat Milwaukee, and he almost beat Milwaukee single handedly, by himself. So Kevin Durant, top 3 player in the league in my opinion. Top 2. I mean, I have 2 guys that I think he's in contention for that number 1 spot. I'll get to that in a separate video. But Kevin Durant, got coming off this Achilles injury, was a very valuable defender, much improved as a playmaker, and was the most efficient scorer in the league. And given the difficulty of shots and volume of shots that he was taking, is unprecedented, Hall of Fame level player. And as much as I hate him, given that I'm a Knicks fan, I gotta tip my hat off to Kevin Durant, man. It's an incredible season, and he's the number 1 power forward for me. I mean, you could maybe argue Giannis, but even then, Kevin Durant almost beat Giannis, Chris Middleton, and Andrew Holiday by himself, and that's just how good Kevin Durant is. So yeah, Kevin Durant's number 1. And that's the end of the video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Next video is going to be about the small forwards, so stay tuned for that. And if you like my video, please subscribe if you haven't already. Share it with a friend. I want to continue to keep growing this community that we have here. I'm really proud of, the progress that I've done so far, in the short time that I have been on this platform. So again, thank you guys so much for supporting the channel. And, if you like my content, please share it. Please subscribe if you haven't already. And stay tuned for my next video, which is going to be about the small forwards. So thank you guys so much for watching, and take care. Have a blessed day. Peace.